Okay, I think we're just taking it up now when in 1966 we are going to move to New Zealand. And I think we'd like to say though, but a year before that, about a year before Arthur got the call to New Zealand, he, the one we accepted, he had another call to New Zealand, another place called Wakatani. And at that time he didn't feel it was time to go, so you declined that call. But about 12 months later, you got the call again, but this time to Wanganui, New Plymouth in New Zealand. And I guess at first we thought we better look at the map and have a look where this New Zealand is. We knew where it was, but didn't know a whole lot about it. And so we did that, and you were feeling more and more that you should go to New Zealand, and maybe you could just fill in a little bit why you felt it was a good time to take that parish, the kind of work and so on?
Yeah, for New Zealand I felt that they were in a transitionary kind of situation where we had a number of congregations in parishes, particularly based on older Lutheran congregations like Martin, or the city work like Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. But now was a time there was an effort to try to get parishes established in some of the country areas. We knew that it would mean a considerable amount of travelling for some folk. New Zealand may look very small to others, and that you could fall off the edges any time if you drove too fast or something. But when it actually comes to running a place like Wanganui to New Plymouth, it's 100 miles from 100 miles or whatever that is in kilometres from the door of our manse at Wanganui to 100 miles to New Plymouth. And then there were 2 or 3 places in between that also needed to be served. And that was the kind of thing that New Zealand was facing at that time, if we're going to try to cover New Zealand, not just cities or certain places. So there was a transition period. And I guess they didn't only look for the present and for the parish at the present time, but I think there was some thinking there that said, if we call a pastor who does come, is he prepared perhaps to think of a longer time in New Zealand that would lead to more continuity, particularly if he's prepared to serve in a couple different places at least while he's over here. So I think that was some of the background thinking. In addition to that, if I can just add that as well, they were looking for someone that had some experience in working with different people of different backgrounds, that it wasn't just tradition that was continuing, but we want a church that is faithful to God's word, and we wanted our people to sense a continuity with others both within New Zealand and feel a real affinity to the work in Australia, because while we talk of the Church of Lutheran Church New Zealand, we at the same time realise that as far as Australia is concerned, we in New Zealand would be one of the districts of Lutheran Church Australia New Zealand. And it's a matter of recognising who we are, who we represent, and what we see as the future, working with people of different backgrounds, not only within New Zealand but on the islands around it and things like that.
And I guess you, as you said, this was a new parish that had just been formed, so again for you it was getting a new parish functioning and going, and that took us over there in 1966.
Yes.
And we started in Wanganui, and you stayed there just under 5 years, I believe. Again, which you can say a bit later, perhaps when you go to the next parish, the reason for that. But as we left Australia, Janet was 9, Karen was 7, and Martin was 2.5 at that time. And I guess for me it was a big thing, leaving our country. I guess I have a soft spot when anybody leaves anywhere, and so, but it was God's blessing to us to have over 13 years in New Zealand finally. And for us as a family to be going on a large liner, the Greek, was it a Greek ship, Orchides, travelling through? Anyway, it was Orchides, I remember. And
it travelled overseas.
We were on that, and that was our first experience. We hadn't travelled overseas anywhere at that time, either by plane or boat, and so it was a big experience for the family. And Arthur was determined, if you remember, to make the most of your first breakfast on the boat. Eggs and bacon and whatever was there, and you started heartily into this breakfast, but next minute you were gone. And so the waiter was standing alongside, and he finally says, "Madam, will your husband be coming back?" I said, "I don't think so." And I think you laid pretty low for the rest of the trip. But we did have lots of fun on the deck, if you remember, games and things. We got a few photos to show that. But I think the other thing we could mention, that when we arrived and the car arrived, you took your own car from Australia because it was a much cheaper thing to do. And later you sold it for more than you paid for it, I think, in the long run.
Couldn't buy a new one in New Zealand if you tried at that particular time.
So you bought your own car.
Or unless you had some overseas money.
That's right. But the fact is that our goods didn't arrive. We arrived in January or February, and our goods didn't get there till about April. I think there was a strike on the wharf or something, and they were sitting around. So we experienced very much friendship and kindness from parish members who gave us a loan of everything that they put in the house. And of course when our goods arrived, there was a big day of sorting all that out. I remember I had things lined up all over the bed, crockery and cutlery and goodness knows what, that had been generously loaned to us. What was your thought, Arthur, if you think about when you first arrived in New Plymouth? As I said, not New Plymouth, first arrived in Wellington, and one of the parishioners met us, and I remember driving home in the rain and very muggy as the car was shut, and seemed to be a lot in this car.
We seemed to be about 6 people in the car, which I think we were. But
I remember that, and I remember coming into Wanganui, and then they pull up at the manse. What did you think of the manse when you first saw the setting of the manse, if you think of that? Martin wouldn't remember, he was only 2½. Don't know whether the girls remember.
Secluded, isolated,
Yes.
About a 10-foot hedge around of it.
Not only a hedge.
No one had a clue
Fence. Big fence.
No one had a clue what was behind the hedge. People hadn't looked in there for 20 years or so, I don't think.
I think it's much more, and it was actually a fence plus a hedge, but it was a big fence. And I think we should tell the story of eventually one member in the church who was a demolition contractor. He was demolishing everything, and he said, "Is there anything you want changed?" And we said, "I thought maybe a lot of people in New Zealand live behind big fences." What a silly thought. But anyway, I thought that, and he said, no, it's just this old house has this big fence and so on. No, he will take the fence down. So he comes in very quickly, but being a demolition man, his wife came along too, because she said, if I don't, every plant, every tree, every shrub will be gone as well. So it was a very interesting day with Normia was the wife. She would say, "No, Theo, not that one, but you can have that one. Lop that one, but don't dig it out." And this went on all morning as this fence came down. After that, the next day, the neighbour across the street came over. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And he said, "Goodness, I've been in this street for years. I have never seen behind that fence, had no idea what sort of a house was there." And he said, "I went to work in the morning, everything was fine. Came home," and so on. So there you go. So that was the beginning of that anyway. So
and the reason why they bought that house was because it was next door to what used to be the Anglican church, and our Lutheran folk had bought that a year or so before I had this call.
And I think Arthur would like to say there that we had a man in the congregation there that I just want to mark something, you can't see it. A man in the congregation there who was this demolition contractor and so on, and when they were going to form the new parish, as you said, and the pastor from Australia hadn't come yet, he decided, the manse was in the street, the church was in the street, he decided to ask the people next door, would they think of selling the house? Because to him a manse has to be next door. And the people said, well, we're putting it on the market. Oh, how much do you want? Well, if I give you cash, what would you do? So he ended up paying cash for the house, and then he let the parish know, I've got a house, if you want it, you can have it, buy it, you know, and so on. And I guess for us, when you got that call, the call said, yes, there is a church, but we don't have a house yet. And we're not actually sure whether you're going to live in Wanganui or New Plymouth. That was in the call. So I guess we have learnt over the years sometimes to just trust God and things will work out anyway. So we had that house, but it needed a lot of renovation. Do you remember renovating the kitchen with a family of 3, and we had to live through all of this? And I was just reading a little old letter the other day that said Theo was very good at using second-hand material that he demolished from somewhere else, and he would always hope it would fit. So he had these doors that would open from the study to the lounge to make the study private, and he thought that would be very good. And I think we both said, but that'll take up all the rounds of the room as this door opens in. But he said, I got this door, that'll be good. No, you don't need a sliding door. No, this will do. So he puts it in, but there ended up a big gap under the door. He said, that's no good, we will get a sliding door. So we did get the sliding door in there. But I think we've never been in a house where you have the chainsaw in the kitchen, the chainsaw was cutting out this, that and something else, the smoke is going everywhere, and finally this all gets done. It was interesting living through it, wouldn't you say?
It was very interesting.
Yes.
One thing we found out very soon with the kids, with marbles, the marbles never stayed lying around on the middle of the floor.
Yeah.
They just automatically ran to the edge, which was so much lower. The house was a house built on sort of river flood sort of stuff, I guess, originally, and the blocks just kept on sinking. So very, very convenient to get rid of marbles or balls or something.
But otherwise it was a good house, and the parish really looked after us, we have to say that. But at the beginning I said when we went to New Zealand, the church didn't offer any furlough, anything to help you come home, and I think we were there 4 years before we came back to Australia at that time. And I remember our first trip back home was pretty enjoyable, but we did go from north to south and a lot of miles, but it was a great time of celebration and so on. Yes. Theo Jurgens, I think it's just nice to tell a few stories about his background and why he was serving the Lord wholeheartedly. Would that be interesting?
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah, you do it. How did that start? Wasn't he flying bombers over Germany?
In the war years,
In the war years?
He was in the Air Force, as many other young people were, and flying from England to bomb various places in Germany. That was one of his jobs, and very risky kind of things. On I don't know how many missions they flew on, but every time there would be so many fewer that came back. And he often said to himself, I wonder, well, is that going to be me this time that won't make it back? And
did he sort of say it to God one day then, that if I get back, if I stay alive, I'm going to serve you?
The way he told me was that he speaks to God as he's in prayer, as it were, while he's
flying around,
flying and so forth, not sure whether he'll get back alive or not. That if I should survive this whole mission in this war program at the moment, I'm really going to give myself to be available to help the church get on its feet and be the church, no matter what country it is, but that the word of God gets out, including New Zealand.
So I think that's why he put his heart into buying the manse across the road, and then I remember painting church pews He lifted the church up on stumps or whatever, and we were varnishing pews and things like this. But he was the man then that decided we needed Sunday school rooms in the backyard of the manse. It was a big backyard, if you remember, and all the beautiful flowers and trees and shrubs.
But yes, took out truckloads of shrubs and stuff,
Yes.
bushes and trees.
But how did he get it through the congregation that he wanted these Sunday school rooms? Do you
I found
remember?
that most interesting. He would every now and then contract on removing a building from here to there, or using the materials, whatever. It was all done by contract. And so this particular unit was a what was it?
TB ward at a hospital.
TB, tuberculosis, isolation kind of ward, and this was going to be rebuilt, and so.
But the opposition got the contract. That was it. Remember?
Yes, that's right.
And the opposition got the contract, and Theo thought, "Oh, good, I'll get him." He said, "You owe me money, so you just give me those, and I'll put them in the church." So then on Sunday morning.
Yes. So Sunday morning, and he hadn't spoken a word to me about it.
No.
Well, I knew that he from time to time contracted on things, but he and a couple others had got together and talked just quietly.
On Saturday, I think.
Yeah, on Saturday or something like that. And Sunday after the service, he says, sticks up his hand, said, "Pastor, do you mind if I just introduce this matter?" And I said, "Go right ahead." And he said, "Well, look, I've just contracted on this building. It won't cost you a penny. We're able to settle debts over this and so forth." And so I'm offering to put this in the back of the pastor's yard, the manse yard. It won't cost you anything, or might be a few pounds here and then. We probably have to shift a power pole or two on the road and stuff like that.
To get it in.
But apart from that, it won't cost you anything. We can use it for Sunday school purposes. We'd need to renovate a bit and so forth. But I can bring it in on the back of a quite a big house.
His truck, whatever
house
he calls
removalist
it,
truck
yes,
sort of thing. And well, the opportunity is there now. Are you interested? He looks around a bit. Well, are we prepared to vote on this? Those in favour that we put it into the backyard, no cost really to you, the congregation. All in favour? Against?
Please show.
Okay, we'll act on that. Finished.
So the pastor was quite amazed at this. But the point is, yes, that he came in, 6 truckloads of shrubs. Trees had to go out, and they were beautiful. And I think in the process, an outside toilet had to go too. It was in the vegetable patch. Remember?
And even the neighbour was watching this from his window, and he sees the toilet go out on the truck. Hey!
Hooray, she said, it's gone. Martin, could I just ask you, do you remember going out to these Jurgens' place? Because we often went out for lunches on Sunday. They were very generous. Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yeah.
Vaguely, yes. I think the girls remember it much more. But they were just such an interesting family that even too when Normia would get home, I think they had 6 sons or something and 1 daughter, something like that. Get home for Sunday lunch. They're so hungry they have the dessert first. And then Normia would have the roast meal afterwards. She was a real Briton. So I think that's about our Wanganui, and then you got a call.
If I ever wanted to talk church business with Theo, I found out one of the ways was to go out to his demolition yard and to sit on the roof while we're stacking timber away or something like that, and talk business there. We can talk business at the same time as cleaning up his yard or something.
Yes. No, they're very, very good to us in so many ways, but he was a very independent person, so if he wants a Sunday school rooms for the church, just put it there. And there were many stories about that too. but they were a real joy to know. And I guess Arthur was just remembering Bible Society there. At one stage, the Bible Society rep came to our house in Wanganui, and he says, "Look, excuse me, I need a hammer, I've just moved here." So he explained that's the way he used often to meet people. Was he had a need, he'd go and ask for a need. So his was the hammer one. I remember that wasn't bad either. And you were always involved in Bible Society quite a bit during your ministry, weren't you?
We said we're happy to lend him a hammer, but I said, "Where are you staying?" and so forth. Oh, he said, "I haven't got a place yet, but I need to unpack a few things somewhere."
Yes.
I said, "Have you got a bed for tonight?" No, not yet, but I'll arrange something." So I offered him, "Would you want to stay with us until you get something?" So he was there with us for,
I don't know, a week or something.
Two or whatever it was.
Know, but he was, yes. So I think that was good, and we just thought about that. And I guess during our time in Wanganui was when my brother John drowned.
Correct.
I think that would have been Wanganui.
Yes.
My brother John was a pastor in New Guinea, and he'd been there for about 2.5 years, and he'd been on a walkabout with visiting outlying villages for 10 days, I think it was, and he was coming back, and he had New Guinea boys with him, but for some reason he decided he wanted to swim across this river, not a big river.
Take the shorter trip home.
Take the shorter trip home, anxious to get home, and the boys went around, and somehow he drowned in there, and they never really found out why. No marks on his body, but I understand his hat was thrown across so short, as well as his shoes, his watch, and they were on the other side. And yeah, so that was a hard time for me, particularly because I didn't get home, I didn't see the family, didn't go to funerals. There just didn't seem money for those things in those days in New Guinea. But I wanted to say there were two reactions that struck me at that time, and that was the difference between our two daughters, Janet and Karen. Karen burst into tears and sits on her dad's knee. Jan says, "I'll go and wash the dishes." She got busy to get something done because it was getting around tea time and she knew things should be done. So that was just interesting. And then the other thing was a learning process, I guess, when two dear ladies from the church fellowship or the ladies guild come to visit, and they knew that my brother had died, but they didn't mention it, didn't want to talk about it, talked about everything else. And I thought, well, that's a lesson for me again, because inside I wanted to shout, we want to talk about it. My brother has just drowned and I want to talk about it. So I think I learned something from that too. Hopefully I have learnt to allow people to talk about these issues if they really wanted to. And I guess the hard thing for me there, of course, was that I didn't get to see my parents, my family, the funeral, nothing, because we're in New Zealand and John was buried in New Guinea and so on. So that was a hard time again too. My father at that time really hadn't flown anywhere, I wouldn't think. He was trying to get an aeroplane to New Guinea for the occasion and couldn't get it for the time he wanted it, or this or that or something else, and he walked out and he said they had a slogan, what was it, that fly with Qantas, they'll do anything for you, and he said, well, it doesn't look like it, and off he went, something like that. But we do a lot of things when we're under stress at times, don't we?
And it was Mervyn that got up there too, wasn't it?
My brother Mervyn also got to New Guinea, and because we've been separated as a family as far as my siblings go, I guess I never ever talked to Mervyn about those issues, and the rest of the family didn't either. And but when we had a family get together
years later,
maybe about 10 years ago, yes, years later, we happened to discuss this issue. And I think the rest of us in the family were very surprised that Martin was very Mervyn rather, was very moved by the whole thing. And it distressed him greatly to be in New Guinea and John's body was put into a body bag in the same little plane that he was flying from A to B. And that really upset him terribly, but he'd never talked about it. But to see him in tears over the issue It's just amazing how some of these things have big effects on us, no matter how tough we appear to be at times. So that was just interesting. But the other part of the parish you want to talk about now is New Plymouth. That was the other end of the parish, as you've already said. It was 100 miles away, or 130 k's, whatever. And there was a big job of forming a congregation, buying a church, looking at land, a whole lot of things. So what would you like to say on that? You finally did buy a building, I see, in 1968. A church hall.
Yes, I think I can put it this way, that if we were meeting only in someone's home or something like that, it would be hard to develop a congregation that people felt free to come and be part of, and that kind of thing. We were at the stage, and having worked, as I referred to in the last parish in Australia, and saw that, you know, when you have your own place that you can use at your own time.
You don't have to set it up all the time and things like that.
And so there were efforts being made now to see whether we could perhaps have a church plant of some kind, hall, whatever, or church. And so that was one of the things that we looked for as perhaps a means of having more of a settled congregation, a place where people could meet at any time of the day or night, whatever was required.
I think you looked at land as well first, didn't you?
We looked at land.
But ended up with a hall.
And then we found the Methodist Church had a hall, or had previously been a church hall, I guess. And our Lutheran folk felt that they could do that up with very little cost, but quite a bit of voluntary labour.
And you did some of that too. I remember, I think I might have too. And I think we could say at this time, in most of your parishes almost, you seem to be part of putting in sewerage, either at the manse or the church or somewhere, digging trenches.
I dug many trenches in many different
as part of the work.
Congregations. That was one of them.
Yeah.
But we felt it was useful to do that. And
it paid off.
A lot of voluntary work, and then we did quite a bit of the looking at the community around about us for half a mile in all directions or something like that. And we actually had a lay worker who was,
That's the first time you'd gone into that.
He hadn't done that before, and we hadn't done that before.
Both knew.
But he was willing to do this, and we worked together over quite a few months. Whereby he did a lot of that initial work to call on
just visiting people, wasn't he?
Within half a mile of the church or something like that, a comparatively new area. And
you did that after the dedication of the building, I think. Yeah, which was helpful, wasn't it?
And that led on to much more things like vacation Bible schools, Sunday school.
And I think we thought it was pretty good in those days to have an average of about 53 in there, and Wanganui as well, at those vacation Bible schools. They were very fashionable at the time. So we were saying that a lot of times in New Plymouth they were good days, and we even used radio spots to let the communities know that we were around. And lots of volunteer work, I remember, was done on buildings and things, and you did your share too, I think, with painting and renovating so we could have a church, and the people were very generous with their help too.
So once we had a building and could use that whenever we wanted to, we looked at ways in which we can use that now to let people know who we are and what our message is. So we just one of the things we decided to do was to have an evangelism mission week preacher, Pastor Lance Starkey, our president, and he did a series of messages on the Waiting Father. It was the title he used, which impressed me and certainly impressed a number of others too.
I guess you were used to calling it the prodigal son.
Yeah.
That parable, yeah.
Okay. And Oh, I can't recall exactly what our attendances were, but they were pretty reasonable night by night. And we were grateful for the support both of our own folk and also the number of folk in the community who did attend, especially after invitations had been issued either by mailbox, letter to letter, letterbox to letterbox, or by our parish worker who was active in that area, because we were trying to cover around about a half-mile
radius around the church.
Radius around the church.
Yeah.
Which meant quite a bit of calling, quite a bit of introducing ourselves, but we felt that was well and truly worthwhile. And then we got on to things like Vacation Bible School, which involved children, and that too was well supported in many ways.
And later at the end of putting this story together, we'll let you know how in the year 2013, where we are now, we heard a good story about someone who was involved in that time while we were in New Plymouth, while you're serving New Plymouth.
Close the door, light the light. We're staying home tonight, far away from the bustle and the bright city lights. Let them all fade away. Just leave us alone, and we'll live in a world of our own. We'll build a world of our own that no one else can share. All our sorrows we'll leave far behind us there. And I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live in a world of our own. Oh my love, I cried for you so much. Lonely nights without sleeping while I long for your touch. Now your lips can erase the heartache I've known. Come with me to a world of our own. We'll build a world of our own that no one else can share. All our sorrows will leave far behind us there. And I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live in a world of our own. We'll build a world of our own that no one else can share. All our sorrows will leave far behind us there. And I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live